9 o'clock. Tuesday, February 22nd, I'd like to call the joint workshop on affordable housing to order. I see that we have a majority of both city and county commissioners that are here. I want to welcome everybody back to the chambers. I know we have a full day. Are we scheduled from 9 to 11 or 9 to noon today?
9 to 11.
9 to 11, that's right, 9 to 11. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I suggest, colleagues, that we have the presentations first and then take public comment so that we're all on the same page. And then we'll get into discussions and we'll go from there. So first of all, are there any agenda modifications, staff? City, county?
No.
No,
sir.
Sounds great. So why don't we go ahead and turn it over to Abena and to Shinkton. And first of all, let me say on a personal note, as the city's representative on the AHAC, the advisory committee, and I'm sure I can speak for Nick as well, and the county's representative, we thoroughly enjoy working with both of you. We are blessed when we come together as a joint AHAC to have city staff that work so well together and are dedicated to moving this community forward. So Abena, Shinkton, I know y'all have put a lot of time and energy into this workshop, and to you and your teams, thank you very much. With that, Abena, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. And if I may invite the city manager or Vince, if you wanted to say any words before, you go right ahead. Okay.
Abena, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay. I was going to defer to the city manager if he had any welcome remarks, but he said we'll jump right in.
Mr. Mayor, can she just remove her mask when she speaks?
Sure, absolutely.
The speakers remove your mask.
Thank you.
We can hear you.
I appreciate that. We have enough distance here. Well, thank you very much, and good morning, commissioners, and to everybody that's in the chamber. Thank you for making a 9 a.m. Conversation. We hope that it is a pleasant one. We're looking forward to sharing a summary overview of all the good things that's been going on in our community as related to affordable housing, and to share some opportunities for us to enhance our collaboration. If we can have the PowerPoint up, please. I want to appreciate many of our partners that may be listening in or have contributed to the preparation of these materials, as well as those that have taken time out of their morning to be here. We have representatives from the Housing Finance Authority, Mark Hendrickson to my right. We have Ashan here with us from the Florida Housing Coalition, and one of the key partners we have for technical support when we're implementing various programs. We also have representatives from your Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. The chairmans are here in the room. I see Jim. Do we see your chair?
Yeah, she's.
Might be on his.
Yep, she's right over here.
Oh, on her way. Mm-hmm. And we have some of our partners from the Tallahassee Lenders Consortium, from just many community partners that make this work possible, and we thank them for their contributions and their tireless efforts throughout the year. This morning, as we have this joint workshop, we do have a huge array of programs that we are involved in, and we won't be able to go through all of them. Many of them you all have had a personal hand in making it happen. And so you might hear some of those phrases. We can dig in and kind of dive a little bit deeper as you have questions, but we'll do a very sort of high-level overview to begin with. We'll talk through briefly what we mean by affordable housing. I think it's always good when we get together to just level set briefly. We'll talk about the local conditions and the needs in our community as we see from various market analysis and reports that we continuously update. Like I mentioned, we'll describe some of our existing programs, and then we'll get into some recommendations that have come out of years of conversation, really, to look for opportunities to enhance the collaborations with the city and the county specifically. And then we'll wrap it up with the summary of recommendations for today. So you've seen this graphic at the last time we met in July. We talked about the housing spectrum. And so, again, we want to remind everybody listening that we're talking about a wide spectrum of needs. When we say housing for our community, it ranges from those that are unsheltered all the way to those that are in the market, private market, or market rate ownership. Various levels of security, but all those are necessary, and we know that we need every single sector to be producing enough in order to meet the needs of our entire community. For today, we are very much focused on the affordable housing, the workforce housing area of needs in our community. So what do we mean by affordable? It means that the household spends no more than 30% of their income on housing costs. That's rent, mortgage, utilities, insurance, if you're a property owner, or taxes. All those should be no more than 30%. So that means anybody and everybody. What is affordable to you depends on your income, all right? You'll hear a lot today about cost-burdened and severely cost-burdened. What that means is if a household is spending more than 30%, they're cost-burdened. If it's 50% of their income, they're severely cost-burdened. You'll hear the phrase area median income. That's something that HUD determines for our area every year. It gradually is going up a little bit by little, but it is still a number that is sort of the starting point for our area. So in Tallahassee, Leon County area, it's about $53,000 for an individual is the area median income. And that's about a $25 per hour wage. If you were to look at the programs that we typically operate for our government-supported programs, we usually look at 80% of that. That's somebody that's earning about $42,000 a year. And then you can go even further down to very, very low income. You'll see us reference 50% AMI as very low income in our community. That's somebody earning about $26,000 a year. All right. And we also hear often about, well, what is affordable housing versus workforce housing versus low-income housing? The reality is affordable housing is workforce housing because nearly every member that benefits from our affordable housing programs are working individuals. They're working households. These are perhaps low-wage earners or, as you could imagine, a firefighter, a teacher, or depending on the mix in their household, depending on how many people are working in the household, depending on how many kids. Their needs vary. But I do want to stress that when we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about housing that is affordable for our area, median income and below, which is primarily a large part of our workforce. So we reference data throughout, and I just want to mention that that is available through various reports, including what's in the agenda, but we also have a dashboard, at least for the Tallahassee area, on our website that if you would like to dig into any of these data, we really invite you to do so. It's something we will continue to improve upon and add more information. But this dashboard helps us to, again, understand the area median income, the market conditions, and sort of the unit mix in our community. Sometimes we have a lot of 3-bedroom units, but we actually need more single-room occupancies. So that mix is important. We recognize some of the challenges after looking at the data, which is we have stagnant low wages, we have insufficient inventory, and our existing housing stock is aging. And of course, the development process is costly, and these together create a lot of challenging situations for us as we try to address affordable housing. Related to the challenges is how we think about the strategies. So rent, homeownership assistance, because rent and mortgages become unaffordable. Repair and rehab, because we have an aging stock and we want to preserve those that we do have. And then the biggest aspect of our work, the biggest bang for our buck, is our development incentive, so we can increase the available stock in our community. So this graph is in the PowerPoint. All I want you to recognize from here, and this is information that we received from the Schimberg Center, which is based in UF, but they produce this information for all localities in Florida. What I want you to see here is the gray bar is all the households that are not cost burdened. The dark blue bar at the bottom are those that are cost burdened. And each column represents different income brackets, if you will. The first 3 are homeowners, and it goes from low income to moderate income. And then the last 3 are renters, again, from very low income to moderate income. And what you'll see is that 4th column there is the very low income renters. They have the largest block, the greatest pressure point of housing affordability. 50% AMI or less is feeling the real pressure of housing and affordability. About 14,000 of our neighbors are housing cost burdened and are very low income. And then this graph represents the kind of development we're seeing when units are being added into our community. The good news is there has been rental units that have been added to our community over the last 10 years or 20 years. But most of those units are over $1,000, which means that they're not really affordable for those that are feeling the greatest pressure point in our community. And so again, we have about 36% of our population that is cost burdened, largely because the low wages have not kept up with rising cost. The largest group is that 50% AMI, and most of the people that are in that 50% AMI are very cost burdened, severely cost burdened. But again, we need solutions across the whole spectrum, because the more we have in each area of the spectrum, the more we can release the pressure on our industry, on families, and to give people more options, right? We also recognize that the urban core with public services already existing presents the best opportunity to add and to increase our affordable housing stock. And so with that said, I mentioned we have a whole suite of tools in our toolkit. Thanks to the actions that you have taken over the years, we continue to grow these. You know the bread and butter programs like our down payment assistance, which we work with our partners at Tallahassee Lenders Consortium. We've done single family infill developments. You'll hear a little bit more about that strategy so we can address vacant parcels within neighborhoods. Home repair and rehab, again, bread and butter programs, right? Recently, you all approved the Community Land Trust, which is yet another tool to extend the affordability period of various housing in our community. And then looking more at renters over the last couple years, we've added programs like rental rehab, landlord risk mitigation to support landlords that want to partner with us. We've done a lot with our federal COVID-related funding to provide immediate rent relief through programs like Leon Cares. All of that is possible, again, only through so many partners that we have at the table, but investing in the key areas where we find our challenges in our community. And it is yielding results. This is just a snapshot of about 5 years of housing programs with the city. About $21 million has been invested. 143 households have received down payment assistance and become first-time homeowners. A huge number of homes that have been rehabbed or repaired over the years, and new construction that has been mainly lifted through smaller developers, community-based developments like our various CDCs, the Bethel CDCs, the Urban League, those folks that are kind of chipping away at this little by little. And we've also seen new multifamily rental units come about through some of the subsidies that you've provided in your various roles. We're very excited about the increase that we're seeing right now, which is about 1,500 certified affordable housing units that are in the pipeline. And I want to put all of that in context a little bit more. One, on this graph, you see, if we looked at just multifamily developments that are income constrained or certified affordable units, we see a wide range of them spread out throughout the geography. Almost all of it is within the urban service area, as you would imagine. But in our existing inventory over the last 50 years, we have about 4,500 units that are income restricted, certified affordable housing units because of some kind of public subsidy or some required affordability period. That's 50 years worth of programs. And then these are relatively conservative numbers. There might be other programs that we're not aware of. And most recently, we've added about 100 units. One of the major developments that you may have already heard about is the Lafayette Gardens. And that's a certified affordable housing development. The city provided some incentives for that, and they leverage funding from the Florida Housing Finance Corporation as well. But since we've had a very focused attention on this work, in terms of talking about it, elevating the issues, inviting more partners to the table. Over the last 2 years, we've seen about 1,500 units that are in the pipeline. And when you look at the graph below that, that's a graph that shows about 50 years worth of additions. Year over year, in the last 50 years, we would add about 90 units a year. Over the next 5 years, looking at 2020 to about 2025, we're looking at 1,500 that will be added. That's triple the rate of development that we see for certified affordable units. 90 units per year in the last 50 years, and we're looking at something like 300 a year if all these in the pipeline come online. So it's really exciting to see that the private sector is showing up. They're meeting you at your conversation and your interests about affordable housing, and we see the greatest bang for our buck with policy decisions that really encourage the kind of environment that produces the volume of units that we know we need so desperately in our community. And so I'm going to pass it on to my colleague. He'll touch a little bit on the county stuff, and then we'll get into the opportunities for collaborations ahead.
Thank you, Abena. Good morning, commissioners. I'm going to very briefly touch on the county housing programs and outcomes, but the bulk of my presentation will focus on the recommendations in your workshop item that will help in our collective effort to increase the stock of affordable housing in our community. Again, very briefly on this one, because commissioners, you may be familiar with this information because it is in your workshop packet, as well as for the county commission, this was also presented as part of your affordable housing workshop last year. With the limited resources we receive through SHIP, which I'll talk more about later, we've been able to focus and prioritize our efforts in preserving home ownership for residents in unincorporated Leon County. As you see on the screen, over the past several years, annually, we've averaged down payment assistance of 12 new homeowners, rehab and replace 10 homes, and perform 30 emergency home repairs like roof and septic tank replacements for low-income residents in unincorporated Leon County. Each and every one of these projects have helped ensure that the residents maintain high quality and affordable housing. Next, I'll highlight the county and city's enhanced collaborations specifically through our respective affordable housing advisory committees, and then I'll walk through the recommendations that are in your packet. So first, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, or AHAC. The county and city each have an AHAC, which is required by state law because we each receive SHIP funds. The AHACs are comprised of 8 to 11 members and are required to submit a report of recommendations annually on how to improve our policies to increase affordable housing. Way back in 2016, the County and City Commission created a joint affordable housing work group to look at ways in which we can enhance our partnership, county and city. In 2017, the County and City Commission approved a set of recommendations from the work group, which included that the county and city AHAC meet jointly at least once a year. Well, our AHACs love each other so much that they met 4 times last year, and primarily focused on the county and city's inclusionary housing policies. Inclusionary housing is a tool used by local jurisdictions to increase the production of affordable housing for low to moderate income households. That's done either through mandatory regulations like inclusionary housing ordinances or voluntary through incentives like density bonuses and expedited permitting. As shown on this slide, the city has a mandatory inclusionary housing ordinance that requires proposed housing developments 50 or more single-family homes to set aside at least 10% of the homes for households that earn 100% or below the area median income. The requirement only applies in census tracts where the income level is higher than our AMI, and the city ordinance also currently only applies to single-family homes and not apartments. So far, only one development has triggered the mandatory ordinance since it was adopted in 2005, and that's the Canopy development. On the county side, we have a voluntary inclusionary housing program consistent with the comp plan. The program offers developers reduced time for site plan review if they set aside 50% of their residential units for affordable housing. Needless to say, this has never been utilized by developers, and part of the reason is the 50% requirement threshold. It's very high. So what do we have? Currently, we have 2 inclusionary housing policies, 1 mandatory and 1 voluntary, and both not heavily utilized. This led to the recommendation of the county and city AHACs, which is that the county and city should adopt identical mandatory inclusionary housing ordinances that require proposed housing developments of 20 or more single-family units as well as or rental units, and set aside at least 10% of those units for affordable housing. This would only apply within the urban service area or USA. The item that we provide, in the item we provide analysis, commissioners, on other local governments in Florida that have adopted similar mandatory inclusionary policies, such as Palm Beach County and the city of Jupiter. Palm Beach has built more than 2,500 affordable housing units, both single family and rental units, since they adopted their ordinance in 2005. And so that's why for this joint workshop, county and city staff are recommending that the county and city commission direct us to partner with the Florida Housing Coalition, which we work with all the time through SHIP and other affordable housing programs, to draft an inclusionary housing ordinance for the county and city that are identical and mandatory to apply within the USA. The ordinance would be developed with input and feedback, continued feedback from our AHAC, but will also incorporate our developers, our realtors, and other affordable housing stakeholders in our community. We expect to bring that back in the spring of next year, in 2023. Option number 3 in your workshop packet is tied to option number 2 on inclusionary housing, and it directs the planning staff to initiate a comp plan amendment concurrent with the update and development of the mandatory inclusionary housing ordinance in order to ensure that any changes to the current policies that the County City Commission make are consistent with the comp plan. I'll move on to this next slide. And as I shared earlier, the primary source of funding for affordable housing for the county and city is the State Housing Initiative Partnership, or SHIP. However, also as an entitlement community recognized by HUD, the city also receives annual federal funding for which they utilize for housing. All in, we invest more than $2.5 million annually on our respective housing programs like down payment assistance and home rehab projects, largely with SHIP funds. State law currently prohibits county SHIP funds from being utilized within the city limits unless there is an interlocal agreement in place. That hasn't been much of an issue because for more than a decade now, the Florida legislature has swept the State Housing Trust Fund, which is the revenue source for SHIP, to utilize those dollars for other obligations. So we haven't gotten much. But in 2021, the legislature passed legislation to reduce the sweep to the trust fund, which will provide more and consistent SHIP funds for both the county and city. In fact, we are anticipating to receive over $3 million for the upcoming fiscal year coming to our community through SHIP. That means more funds available to address the affordable housing needs in our community. And so that brings me to our next recommendation, and that is that the county and city enter into interlocal agreement to allow us to utilize county SHIP funds to build affordable homes and rental units in concert with the city within the city limits. This would better position us to address affordable housing, the highest affordable housing needs in the community, as well as address poverty and inequity in neighborhoods like Bond, Frenchtown, and others throughout our community through affordable housing.
What option is that?
Chairman.
That is option number 4.
4, okay.
Yeah. Just another reminder, the data that's in your item, as well as the reports that we share in there, as Abena mentioned, our highest needs in our community is rental units for those who are 50% or below our area median income. By state law, the county and city can't spend more than 35% of our SHIP funds on rental units. At least 65% has to go to home ownership programs. With an interlocal agreement in place, we'd be able to combine county and city SHIP funds to build more rental units where they belong, which is near public transits and employment centers within the city limits. We could use our combined SHIP funds to leverage state and federal funding, such as bonds and tax credits, to build more rental units in Tallahassee, Leon County. Another benefit of an interlocal agreement is that it furthers our collective efforts to support the city's Neighborhood First program. For the past few years now, the city has been working with neighborhoods like Bond and Frenchtown and Griffin Heights to develop and implement Neighborhood First plans created by the residents of the neighborhoods. And in January, during its board retreat, the county commission adopted a strategic initiative that stated to work with the city to develop and implement the Neighborhood First program and the county's continued commitment to address poverty and inequities in 32304 and other neighborhoods that have experienced generations of distress and disinvestment. Commissioners, this recommendation affords us the opportunity to work together to empower and strengthen those neighborhoods. When you look at the Neighborhood First plans for Bond and Frenchtown and Griffin Heights, they're all unique, but they also consistently call for more affordable and quality homes and homeowners to strengthen their neighborhoods long-term. By entering into an interlocal agreement, we'll be able to invest county and SHIP funds dollars collectively to build affordable single-family homes, which aligns with what the residents have shared is a major priority for their neighborhoods. But I'll also add that on the county side, we'll still be able to address the needs of unincorporated residents of Leon County since we are receiving additional funds. And so we'll still be able to provide down payment assistance to our unincorporated neighbors, as well as emergency home repairs and other critical services to preserve affordable housing in those areas. Next, I'll talk a bit about our infill redevelopment efforts. Over the years, the county and city commissions have taken several actions to promote infill redevelopment in order to increase single-family housing and address the missing middle, like duplexes and triplex in existing neighborhoods. These efforts generally focus on revitalization of vacant and blighted properties. And as authorized by Florida statutes, the county and city have the authority to sell or donate properties deemed suitable for affordable housing to nonprofit and community-based organizations. This is something the county and city has done with partners like Habitat for Humanity, as well as our joint community land trust. We work with them to identify vacant or blighted properties that have come into the possession of the county and city that we deemed is suitable for affordable housing. And they, our partners, build a home that is affordable for a low-income family, providing access to home ownership as well as redeveloping that community. We need more partners like Habitat and the CLT for infill redevelopment and to help more families get into the homes that they can afford. So that brings me to our final recommendation, and that is direct city and county staff to pursue partnership with the Promised Land Community Development Corporation. So what is that? The Promised Land CDC was recently formed by Bethel Missionary Baptist Church and is committed to bridging the wealth gap in minority communities through sustainable home ownership. Ben and I have both had the opportunity to meet the executive director of the Promised Land CDC and talk about the organization's vision to increase affordable home ownership in the community, especially in distressed neighborhoods. This aligns with everything that the county and city is doing through infill redevelopment. So with this recommendation, we would work together to pursue a partnership with the Promised Land CDC. For the county, that would look like, what that would look like is similar to what we already do with Habitat, and that is work with our Housing Finance Authority of Leon County to share with nonprofits the list of properties that we've received through that tax deeds that are suitable for affordable housing. The properties that the organization is interested in is either sold or donated to them to build or redevelop for housing. And the HFA also assists with the organization and identifying financing if that is needed. This will be the same approach we would take with the Promised Land CDC, and it's consistent with the county's real estate policy. For the city, this would align with the authority that they have through Florida statutes. So with this last slide, it recaps the recommendation that I've presented, commissioners, which is accept the joint reports, partnering with the Florida Housing Coalition to draft the updated inclusionary housing ordinance for the county and city, which would come back to the county and city commission respectively for consideration, initiating a comp plan amendment, drafting an interlocal agreement on SHIP, as well as pursuing a partnership with Promised Land Community Development Corporation. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Before I go to Commissioner Maddox real quick, let me make sure we're on board. So for the purposes of the workshop today, you would need a city vote and a separate county vote.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yes.
Sounds great. Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real quick, you and I both serve on the Affordable Housing Committee for the city and county respectively. The work that you guys did as staff is absolutely amazing here. The things that you brought back to us, the information was very informative. But even more so, the recommendations that came out of those committees is exactly where we need to be. And so, very simply, I just want to go ahead, more than pontificate, to say great job. Look forward to the partnerships with the city and county, and go ahead and make the motion for items 1 through 5 for the county.
Well, Commissioner, we're going to take public comment, and then we'll come back. And,
Yes, sir.
And I'll come straight to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I know that both your AHAC and the city advisory, well, I don't want to speak on your behalf. I know the city advisory council has strongly endorsed the recommendations that are here, and I'm sure that the county AHAC has as well. And y'all have done a wonderful job. Mr. Clerk, how many public speakers do we have today?
We have 3 speakers here in person. We may have one who had indicated some difficulty connecting virtually.
All right, walk us through them.
All right. First speaker is Kayla Norris Barber. The second speaker will be Stanley Sims. We'll give speakers 3 minutes as we normally do.
Thank you for joining us. Your name and address for the record, please.
Kayla Norris Barber, 527 West Brevard Street. I am the executive director of the Mount Olive Affordable Housing and Community Development Corporation. It appears that we place a great deal of emphasis on affordable multifamily rental units. While multifamily buildings may increase the number of affordable housing units, it perpetuates poverty. Homeownership is the genesis of all wealth in this country. We have more renters who are severely cost-burdened than homeowners. We would like to see a shift to focus of providing more single-family affordable units for homeownership. Over the last 2 years, the county's Housing Finance Authority has done 2 multifamily bond deals and are currently working on 2 more. We'd like to see the HFA to start doing some single-family bond deals. I am pleased to have read the recommendation to direct staff to pursue a partnership with the Promised Land CDC for the development of affordable housing for home ownership. I ask that you expand that recommendation to include other affordable housing providers. The need is great, and really the laborers are few. There are others who are committed and willing to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Next speaker, Stanley Sims, and then Chuck White.
Your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Stanley Sims at 1320 Avondale Way, and I'm challenged very good after that very good presentation from Mr. Kenneth Barber, so I'm not going to allow him to outdo me this morning. I'm very glad here to stand to hear this report, where out of this big mountain of despair, this committee, Mayor, has given us a stone of hope. Commissioner Cox, if you notice how they have been receptive to the feedback to people of this community of all walks. Commissioner Cox, when you first started, you directed staff to present things on an 8th and 9th grade level. make it user-friendly, big letters so they can clearly read and understand. We saw that today. Another thing that me and my good friend Jim McSwain, we're twins. A lot of us get us mixed up. I was confused about the definition of what's affordable housing, what's first housing, what's this housing, what's that housing. In this presentation today, they clearly broke this down. As my good friend, Mr. Barber, said, this is not perfect, this is not wholesome, this is not complete. But what we do agree this morning, this is a great step in the right direction. I want to thank Mr. Long for having the wherewithal to build a productive relationship with Mr. Shinkton. He's receptive, methodical, and reactive. Ms. Sabina, did I come close? Oh, the Lord is with me this morning. I'm not going to try that twice. Has told her staff he's non-traditional, but hear him out.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
This is how we bridge the gap. My Sunday school teacher, in the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., because in Black History Month, I ain't just black, I'm black diggity. We all play a role in here. And I'm very happy of the role that this team jointly with the city and the county, so we can obtain things.
You're at 3 minutes.
Boom, shakalaka.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Mr. Clerk.
Chuck White is the last speaker we have in person.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is Chuck White. I live at 537 Frank Shaw Road here in Tallahassee. I am a board member with the COC, Big Bend Homeless Group. I'm a current member of the Housing Finance Authority. I've been on the Housing Leadership Council, and in the past, I served in the county's AHAC. One of the things I want to express now that I think needs to be included is that when I was part of the AHAC committee, I seem to have gotten the impression that there was an agreement that we would institute a no-loss policy so that no existing low-cost housing, low-income housing would be knocked down for the sake of future development without it being replaced someplace else. And I thought that it was important that we have a representative that sat on the review committee to make sure that that was the case. If somebody wants to go in, like Whole Foods, and knock down 10 houses and build their commercial establishment, they should be responsible for replacing that. So I want to put that in front of you that I think needs to be added. I think that Shinkton and Abina did a wonderful job in their presentation, and I concur completely with what they're saying. Finally, I want to bring this one point up. I did a window survey. I'm a real estate developer, and I've developed a fair number of low-cost housing projects. We have somewhere around 400 vacant mobile home lots in existing communities inside and outside the city limits. They already have infrastructure. They got electrical, they got septic, or they got sewer, they got water, they have roads, but they're vacant. So I challenge both commissions to figure out a way that we can encourage the development of those properties in such a way, and if you look at it, if you put 3-bedroom units on there, that's 1,200 bedrooms that we could increase right there in front of us. And so I encourage y'all to adopt that as part of your plan somehow or another to make that a reality. and I thank all of you for your service to the community. God bless y'all.
Thank you.
I like that.
Mr. Clerk, our next speaker.
Mayor, we will see if Rob has connected. We had a WebEx registrant and wasn't sure what his work schedule would allow him to connect or not. Do we have Rob? I do not see, so I think, Mayor, I think that's it for our speakers.
All right, do we have anybody else that's here that'd like to speak that hasn't had a chance to fill out a card? All right, we will move into commission discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioners, as we traditionally do.
Mr. Mayor, there are two other people at the table with our representatives. I'm sure they're not just sitting there to listen to us. Is there something that they need to add to this conversation?
Urbana, Shinkton?
Commissioners, we brought our partners here to be able to answer any questions. In particular, of course, the Housing Finance Authority is in charge of bond financing. They work primarily with multifamily developments, but also, as Shinkton mentioned, they support some of the unincorporated area single-family unit development or repairs and rehab. So we can dive more into that, and certainly at your pleasure, you can invite them to make some opening remarks. Florida Housing Coalition is great because they have a view of what's happening across the whole state of Florida, and they're very tuned in with what's happening with the Sadowski funding and just what policies seem to be working across the state. So yes, at your pleasure. They may make some remarks so they can answer questions that you need.
Gentlemen, welcome. Any opening comments?
Yeah, Mark Hendrickson, administrator with the Housing Finance Authority. Just a few brief things. First is that we are an entity that is created by the county and the board members are appointed by the county commission, but we're the entity that has jurisdiction in both the city and the county. We can operate freely, and so we become a vehicle to help with the coordination of the city and county because by the nature of state law, housing finance authorities, again, are creatures of the county, but are not limited. They are not an unincorporated county HFA. They are the HFA for all parts of the county, including the city of Tallahassee. It said there's a lot of things that we've got going right now. There's about 850 units in the pipeline that we hope will be financed this year. We've got a new deal that'll be coming to the county commission where it is the conversion of 3 old student complexes to affordable housing, which is a great first new step that we're working on. And last, along with our sister housing finance authorities, the HFAs are the entities that finance the effort to get SHIP funded. So we are intimately involved with getting SHIP funded, even though we're not a recipient of SHIP funds. We want the city and the county to get those, and so do the other HFAs around the state. And we are the source that puts the resources together to have the lobbying effort to make that happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Oh, here we are. Good morning. I'm Sean Nesbitt with Florida Housing Coalition, Chief Programs Officer. Thank you for having us here. Certainly happy to answer any questions. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are the state's premier organization for training and technical assistance regarding anything related to affordable housing. We primarily work with the state with the Catalyst program, providing training and TA around the SHIP program. We work with every local government in the state, so we're well aware of what's happening around the state, and we particularly support inclusionary zoning, permanent affordability, both of which you already have in place, and we're happy to continue to work with the Urbana, with Shinkton, to continue to strengthen those programs that you currently have in place to make them work better to provide the housing that you so desperately need.
Gentlemen, thank you both for what you do and what your organizations do, not only in our community, but across the state. We really do appreciate it. Okay, with that, let's open it up for discussion, and then I know the vice chairman would like to make a motion on the county side at some point. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. Thanks to all of you for your presentations and for your work, and also to the 2 AHACs. I know a lot of work has gone into these proposals, and let me say from the outset, I plan on supporting them. I think these are good, solid policy ideas that will help us increasing the stock of affordable housing. but I do want to kick the tires a little bit before I buy the car. Abena, you had a really good presentation where you talked about how over the last 50 years, we've added about 90 units or so to our affordable housing stock. But the great news is that we project over the next 5 years about 300 units a year, so 1,500 units over the next 5 years. Our existing inclusionary housing ordinances consist of incentives that have been rarely used by developers. So in other words, our current policies have not been very helpful in moving the needle and increasing the inventory stock. So my question is, can you give us more detail on why this increase projected over the next 5 years is taking place? What have we done, or what market forces are driving this so that we're seeing this surge? It's not enough for us, but it's a market improvement over what we've seen over the last 50 years.
Yeah, that's right. I think let me speak on the city and invite Shinkton to comment on the county aspect as well.
Thank you.
I feel it. You know, I think sometimes when you have a problem and you don't talk about it, it just stays that way. And what we have seen in our community is that for the last 2 years or so, we have been aggressively talking about this issue. We have brought it to the forefront. It shows up in almost every public meeting. And I think our surrounding community partners take notice, and those that can rise to the occasion to be partners and to support that. We're seeing an increase in developers from other regions that are paying attention to the words and the issues you're elevating and wanting to be part of it. So new people are entering into our community wanting to be part of the solution. And many of them are not unfamiliar with inclusionary housing policies or incentives that support affordable housing. And so when they talk with us and we say, this is something that's important for us, we need you to add it, it's not even an issue. When it comes to our existing inclusionary housing, because of the way it was crafted, it was so particular, it's hard for developments to trigger it. And quite frankly, other developments avoided it. So to get a development of the size of 50 single-family homes at one time within the city limits is hard. We don't have as many parcels that can accommodate that. But we're also seeing the market want diversity in the mix of units. And so naturally, we've had developments that would come to us that are focused on rental units, and they never will trigger the inclusionary housing policy. So I think all of those were playing a role. The demand for housing is huge across the whole nation, and we want more units no matter where they fall. But if we want to address the acute pressure, we need those policies that enforce it, and then balance it out with incentives. We have to do that part. Our inclusionary housing does front load incentives, even though there is a requirement for the number of units. So, Commissioner, I think all those are playing a role into the increase that we're seeing. Some of these developments happened on their own in the past, as you mentioned, 90 units maybe year over year, where they were going after the traditional financing structures that the state provided. But now that we're intentional about it and we're laying together the incentives, we're promoting it, we're producing, we're sure, we're going after it. I think we're inviting new players that are doing this work that they may not have otherwise thought to do.
Sounds good. And just two more quick follow-ups. With these policy proposals about the inclusionary housing ordinance change, the comp plan concurrent and SHIP, and then working with the partnership with the Promised Land CDC. Again, I plan on supporting these. I think these are good, solid proposals, and I think they will help. But my question is, with the adoption of these policies today, if it does pass, and I think that it will, how much will that affect the statistics, the projections that you gave us? If we're expecting 300 units a year for the next 3 years, what will these policies do? For example, to what extent will these policies be additive to the 1,500 over 5 years, or will it cannibalize some of the things that we're already projecting?
I think it will absolutely add to it. So what we're projecting with the 1,500 are those that have come to us and said, we want to build affordable housing specifically. What the inclusionary housing policy does is open it up for all development that's happening. And I think with your indulgence, you might have more insight about the trend of market rate multifamily and single-family developments that are already happening. We're not counting that, but if you just take 10% of that growth, which I think it's anywhere between 500 or 700 units every year, that is an addition to those developments that are specifically focused on affordable housing. And I will say the units that we encourage also are a mix of affordability and mix of households, because that economic diversity is really crucial. We don't want to concentrate people at various socioeconomic statuses in one place, right? And so a certified affordable housing development might set aside, let's say, 80% of their units, or 64, those at a very low, another portion for moderate income, a few that are moderate. That's a model that is working nationally. It builds stronger neighborhoods, and we want to encourage that. So.
Sounds good. Last question. I'm sure everyone here, just about everyone here, probably seen the excellent article from Tamarin Waters in today's paper about the housing market and the affordable housing inventory. Very timely. We all know about increased construction costs and supply chain issues. Those were mentioned in the article. How do those market forces factor into our projections, the ones that you shared with us today? Those problems are not going away anytime soon. Construction costs are not going to magically get back to where they were anytime soon, nor are the supply chain issues going to be addressed, fixed. So are these projections that we're talking about, the 1,500 over the next 5 years, the additive element of these policy changes, to what extent, I know you have a crystal ball, but to what extent can you guess that the market forces about the increased costs of construction and providing affordable housing affecting these numbers?
From what we've seen over the last year, just with the activity in-house and from interested parties, I think this shift will take us to adaptive reuse. And one action that you took a year or so ago that really will help is the conversion of hotels to single-room occupancies. There are significant cost savings for developers to reuse existing infrastructure. Not only is that more environmentally sustainable, it just costs less. And I think you'll see the private sector start to explore that. And thankfully, we're one of the few jurisdictions that have an ordinance in place. We're prepared to support those kinds of developments. I do think the pace of construction will slow down, but we certainly need the local capacity and the regional capacity to meet this challenge. That is a fact. We have not built at the pace that we needed to for decades, and we're trying to solve that problem now. We need, the career services to kind of catch up, the pipeline of contractors to also catch up. And certainly the market factors with material supply and demand is a real thing. But what is different, I think, in this 5 to 10 years is the significant injection of funding from federal, state, and local level for this that signal that this commitment is real and that there's money there to pursue these kinds of development if we can all rally up around it. Washington, did you want to add to that?
No, you got it.
Ms. Abena, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, to the team. Again, to the AHACs that have worked so hard on this. Really want to thank you for all your work. Like I said, I do plan to support the proposals. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I have the Mayor Pro Tem, then Commissioner Welch, and Commissioner Porter in queue. If you'd like to speak, just let me know. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, Abena and Shinkton, thank you all and our visitors here this morning for the work that you've done in this area. As we all know, this is not unique to the city of Tallahassee or Leon County. This is an issue facing us across the state of Florida and indeed in this nation. It is contributing significantly, I think, to the rise in our homeless population. And so it's incumbent upon us to do whatever we can as quickly as we can to get individuals into affordable housing. As you have defined it here this morning, it has been confusing over time because we've used low-income housing, we've used the term affordable housing, workforce housing, and so now I'm glad that we have a clear understanding of what affordable is and how it's defined going forward. I had a couple of questions. One you addressed in your presentation, Abena, and just in your remarks, but just to make sure that as we move forward, that we are looking at how this affordable housing is geographically dispersed throughout the community, because it has a lot to do with how it improves neighborhoods, I think, throughout the city, and also the schools that will serve those families. It has an impact on adding diversity, the economic diversity in particular, to the schools that that will serve those kids in those communities. So could you just talk to us a little bit more about how we're going to ensure that these developments are geographically dispersed throughout the community?
Yes. Let me speak about the inclusionary housing sort of as the philosophy of it. And I might invite Mark, if you have some comments on some of the rules that Florida Housing Financing has in place to ensure the proximity is considered when projects come online. But inclusionary housing is by design to support economic diversity and to reduce economic segregation. So the impetus is you place inclusionary housing policies in census tracts that are doing much better than other parts of the community. Okay. And by encouraging or requiring the units, affordable units within those areas, you're creating that diversity that's necessary. That's sort of the spirit behind inclusionary policies. If we make it across the entire community, you have the added benefit of capturing new developments that are happening anywhere in the community rather than in select spaces. Neighborhoods are changing all the time for the better and sometimes for the worse. And so, one issue we know with our current policy is we know we want home ownership, and we do have quite a lot of our investments in home ownership, down payment assistance. We're going to keep doing that for sure. But as some of these neighborhoods change, there are multifamily rentals coming, and those multifamily renters are not affordable. The rent is not affordable for those neighborhoods. So having it citywide or within the urban service area ensures that anywhere development happens, that team is thinking about it, that neighborhood is thinking about it, and we don't get to just push that problem to one part of the community. Mark, did you have additional comments on how we ensure the economic diversity?
Yeah, most of the rental that's produced involves subsidies from the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, and they have specific policies that encourage development outside of areas of concentrated poverty unless that is part of a redevelopment issue of a city or county. So they're not going to say you absolutely, for example, you can do the Orange Avenue redevelopment because it's part of a concerted plan. But their normal policy would be is unless it's part of a plan like that, the placement of the new units has to be outside of the poverty concentration areas.
Okay. I'll just add, Commissioner Richardson, I mean, the way you do it also is to get the county and city locked together on this idea, right? Because now you have broadened it beyond the city limits, and you do bring it in other parts of our community within the urban service area.
Right. If I can add also to that, the advantage of doing it citywide, for example, if you look at a census tract, most of the population could be concentrated in one part of it, and it could all be currently low income, but you could have a large tract of land that's attractive to a developer, that's on the other part of that census tract. And so that, currently as it stands would not, trigger the inclusionary zoning, but, by going citywide and looking at all of your land, you can now capture all of that new development, as Abena said, including in areas that are changing or, that have an opportunity for new development to come in that won't displace existing residents, but also add, economic opportunity within that census tract. So there is quite a bit of advantage to looking at how you can apply it citywide.
Okay. That also brings another thing to mind. I know in our policy, it used to be, I'm assuming that it still is, that a developer could buy their way out of the inclusionary housing. How are we addressing that, or will it be addressed in what you're recommending?
Yeah, I think what you're describing is the payment in lieu of.
Yes.
And there are certain provisions in our current policy that create flexibility for a developer.
Okay.
There are ways that they can build the units in adjacent properties as long as it's done at the same time as they're doing the other market rate. There is a fee in lieu that can be part of the policy, a set amount. I don't know if there is a gradient amount or amount that changes over the years, because the problem you have with setting a set amount today is that in 10 years or even 5 years, it may not translate to much in terms of what you can buy with that payment in lieu of. But that is certainly one of those things that will be considered as we draft the update.
Great, okay. And I've got a couple of other questions, both, they're related. When we work with the families, and I know that Karen does this through the TLC, are we working with them to improve their skills and education so that they can maybe get those jobs that will pay them a higher wage? And the reason that that's related to the last question that I wanted to ask, what I've noticed in a lot of instances when homes are built, either through TLC or Habitat, the homeowners aren't able to do the upkeep. And so over time, you see deterioration in the quality of the home. And so I guess it would be incumbent upon us to make sure that the homeowner has the skills and abilities and education to get those jobs that will pay them a higher wage, so that not only can they own the home, but have the income to do the upkeep as those homes require that. So is that, and I'm kind of looking at Jim McShane behind you, because I know he's probably thinking that, yeah, we do that. But is that factored into this whole equation as well?
Yeah, that homeownership preparedness, and not just financial preparedness, but just knowledge about how to keep your home. That is a huge part of it. The city does currently include homeownership classes, and I believe the county does as well, as part of down payment assistance programs. And we have historically also provided some housing counseling funding through community partners that provide that to anyone that is looking for it. We do not mandate it as a condition for receiving, homeownership, new home assistance. It is strongly encouraged because it will serve them well. But that problem exists sort of across the whole spectrum as well. You have folks that have a lot of money that buy big homes, and they can't keep up with that as well. So we try to work with partners to ensure that those resources are there. I think in terms of the income for work or careers, that is a huge part. That's something that the city doesn't have as much control over to set income limits, et cetera. And so we really do need our partners to help us with getting those wages that allow our workforce to be able to live here.
Yeah, because like I said, there have been so many instances where I've ridden around the community and I've seen homes that were built, and over time, the homeowner is just not able to do the upkeep, and you see deterioration start to occur, and I mean, that's not doing us any good over time.
That's right.
And I'm glad Commissioner Richardson, a lot of times they don't know how to also. And so one of the things on the county side, we hold annually, we haven't done in a couple of years because of COVID, but we intend to do this year again, it's hold a home expo. And the cities participate, the city utilities participate in those, because I'm telling about smart meters and also being and getting an energy audit, because those are critical things that they need to know when they become homeowners. And so we typically target that with people that we've assisted through our housing program. But one of the things that we've had preliminary conversation with is with Habitat and Antoine about how do we incorporate them into the process too, because that is critical in talking about that preservation and sustainability of home ownership. It's tough for even us, so for them it can be even tougher. So I think it's very important that that's a conversation you're constantly having.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Welch. And then Commissioner Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo some of the other statements that were made. I trust that you guys know more about this than I do, and I trust my colleagues who are on these committees to support the 5 options that are being offered. I just want to offer up, well, first I have a couple questions and then offer up a little context because I represent a district in the county that's growing rapidly. Am I correct when I saw the slide that said that over the past 50 years, we've only developed 4,500 affordable housing units? Is that correct?
Yeah, these are the certified units that we know about in our inventory, and it is conservative. There are developments that would be considered naturally occurring as affordable. You know, they are at a price point that would be affordable to a certain income, but they may not be a certified unit. Maybe they weren't subsidized and they don't have requirements on affordability. So that's what we know about in our current inventory.
Okay, so roughly 10 a year.
Over the last 50 years, looking at from 1970, it's about 90 units that are added every year. And so there are peaks. You know, a
Right,
big
but on
development
average.
happens, yeah, but about 90 that's been added year over year.
Okay. The article in the Democrat, as Commissioner Minor mentioned today, was pretty salient, real telling. You know, I believe they used the words crisis. Am I recalling that correct, Commissioner? I don't honestly recall, but you know, there's a lot of discussion in the county, in our community about growth and how we deal with growth and how we embrace growth. And I have people routinely tell me they'd like to see no growth. I think that's just not
Good way to die.
a realistic position, right? We've got to recognize that we are growing, that our population demographics are suggesting that we're growing. And if we don't have a housing crisis, I think it's close. I believe the article said they're anticipating a 20% appreciation in real estate values next year. I mean, that's an insane number. I know my property value's gone way up, right? So we are exacerbating wealth gaps. These are big-time problems in our community. At some point, we've got to embrace that we're going to grow. We want to grow smart. We want to grow the correct way. And I feel like in the community that I serve, particularly, we need to embrace that. We're growing. We've got to provide more housing. We have a housing crisis in Leon County, and I think we need to say that. I also, in that article, it said there were 4,500 homes in the hopper. Is that correct, in the permitting process? I don't know, the county administrator's not here. If that were true and we placed this 10% requirement, would that mean that 450 of those units would become affordable units?
City Manager, were you getting ready to?
Mr. Manager.
Commissioner, Mr. Mayor, it might be helpful. We've got our growth management directors here. 4,500 units certainly would be way more than an annual supply. In a typical year in the city, you would expect 300 single-family homes and about 700 to 800 multi-family units. And if I recall the numbers right, in the unincorporated area, maybe 700 or 800 in a particular year. I think I've got those numbers right. So that would be a mini-year application. I think the question is, if we applied a 10% standard, should you expect 450 units? I think generally the answer is yes, but it would take, some years to accomplish that. Karen, did I describe that correctly?
Dr. Jummerville, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Yes, sir, you did. Anything that would come into the permitting process and be subject to that requirement, that would be correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Welch.
Thank you. So I think the article was taking into account Falls Chase with like 1,500 units. I think if you look around the county at some of the bigger developments that we're anticipating, Welaunee in my district, Falls Chase, other elements of Canopy. I mean, if we apply a 10% requirement on builders, you're talking about if we embrace growth and continue to grow like we anticipate over the next, say, 5 to 10 to 20 years, that 10% requirement would create a substantial amount of affordable units in theory. Is that correct?
That's correct. And another good thing about the policy is there are incentives, and the one that everybody loves is the density bonus. What works really well for our private partners is the ability to add more units because they're providing more affordable units. So if they were doing 100 units, that's what they're entitled to by zoning, they could get up to 25% more that they could earn more revenue and more profit from as well. So we try to balance this requirement with incentives, and that has the potential to increase the number of units that otherwise would have been constructed.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. All right, so I won't get into the weeds any more than that, but I just want to sort of encourage all of us to embrace this idea that the sort of rising tide of home availability lifts all ships. and we've got a housing crisis. We've got to do something to accommodate people who want to live here. It has ripple effects across economic vitality and diversity and people being able to, create net worth and things like that. We have growth in our economy in terms of Amazon and workforce housing is going to be needed. So we've got these problems, and I think this is a step in the right direction. My only other commentary, I wanted to ask specifically, I know this mentioned the Bethel CDC thing. Before Mr. Barber spoke, it occurred to me that there may be other partners like that. I don't know what the Mount Olive CDC is, but I think if there are other partners that are willing, developers that are willing to engage with the county and the city, and we're all on the same page, I think we should look into that, embrace that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Shington. And then lastly, somebody else who I'm sure knows more about affordable housing than I do, the gentleman who spoke about mobile home lots. 450, I believe he said, mobile home lots that are vacant right now. Is there a mechanism that we could utilize to try and make those lots available for affordable units?
That's something that we've talked about. Chuck brought this up during a previous Housing Leadership Council meeting that we had through UPHS, and we're looking at some of the options. Right now, like I mentioned, SHIP is our primary source of funding. You can't spend more than 20% of your funds on mobile homes. The state are not big fans of mobile homes. They depreciate. They typically are sometimes hard to maintain. But we've been working through the Housing Leadership Council to look at different options to see about, based on what he's proposed, how we could actually implement something like that. And if something were to come up, we would bring back before the county and or city commission.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with some of that available lots is that most of those are privately owned, right? So as city or county government, we can't make them do whatever we want them to do on those lots. Certainly on our inventory, we can. Our best tool is incentives, where we can provide some assistance for a private owner to do something with those vacant lots. And I think that exists now. Those are things we can explore. Mobile homes, like Shington said, hasn't always been encouraged or supported. But I think with the improving technology in the market, the demand, and quite frankly, just the pressure to produce units quickly, I think there could be some innovation in the years ahead on modular homes that can really start to change our perception about what, consider mobile homes versus modular.
I have one last follow-up on that. Just something to think about. This is a housing crisis, not just in Leon County. It's the entire state of Florida, right? Everybody's moving here. We got real problems. Perhaps the state, who may not like mobile homes because we got coastal areas, right? And they're frankly not safe in hurricanes. We acknowledge that. But maybe our collective lobbyists that we employ at the city and the county, I saw Dr. Sharkey earlier, maybe we can work on the state to, in inland areas, maybe certain distances away from the coast, you could utilize SHIP funding for mobile homes that are available and can be rapidly deployed to, fix this problem that we frankly now accept that we have. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, all of y'all, for being here and all the work you're doing. I agree with what has been said, that this certainly is a crisis. I personally think this is a man-made, manufactured crisis. Other countries don't have this crisis. They have better housing policies with a stronger public sector involvement. In addition, we're so severely limited by a lack of support from the state, who make our job even harder, and from decades of cuts in federal and state funding. So I can only imagine the work you've been doing getting harder, and I'm happy to hear that it looks like there might be some more stability in the funding, moving forward, because that is essential. I have a few questions, but some of it I can just send in emails, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds of everything. I do support options 1 through 4. I don't feel like it's not that I can't support option 5. I would like to know a little bit more about what we mean when we say a partnership, and I agree about other developers, other people being included. I know that Bethel has done a lot of great work I don't know enough about specifically if the Promised Land CDC, and not to pick on them, but because they're included, if they've developed a house in this area as the Promised Land CDC. And so that, we can maybe have more discussion about. I do feel like we are not being nearly aggressive enough to meet what is the need. And I know we're here to talk about these recommendations, which I do support, but I know in some of our conversations, we've discussed other things too, and I know y'all have other things that you want to do and are doing. But I would really like to see us look into what some other places are doing, whether it's, what we're doing with our impact fees, what we're doing with, we've considered, mandated inspections, rental unit certificate of occupancy. And I know, when I do research, it's in different states, and I don't always know what y'all know as far as the restrictions. But because we've got, as y'all have outlined in the items, we've got this, we got to build new units and hopefully not exacerbate our urban sprawl. We've got to restore existing units. We've got to maintain the units that are already there. Then we want to increase the home ownership. So there's, as we've got to attack this from many ends. And we're limited in all kinds of ways, financially and legally. And not to mention when I read some of these numbers, and I know it's a place to start, but for a lot of people, if you're spending 30% of your income and you don't make very much, that's not a lot to save. That's not a lot to do other stuff with. We're using it as our standard, but that's not, and we should, but that's not a livable standard, I think, for most people. Not to mention, including, I was reading, so it says HUD, determination of affordability considers rent and mortgage, utilities, homeowners association fees, property insurance, renters insurance, and other housing costs. That doesn't even include transportation costs. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir, so I'm not trying. I just really want to see moving forward that we, at least as far as I'm concerned, I want to see us take action in these different avenues, because I don't feel like just with the inclusionary housing that we're going to get there. And so I want you to know you have my support, to consider these other options. And I know I'm not on the AHAC, and so I try to keep up, but I know some of these conversations are already happening. And I want to see us put our full, support behind this, because it's extremely concerning, and it's the most important thing of anyone's life, is where you live and living in safety. So with that being said, I do just have a few questions on some of the programs that we have and how much data are we collecting. For instance, some of these, the rehab, the emergency home repair, are we able to keep up with some of these people who we assist to see, a year later, 5 years later, are they still in their home? Or with, this assistance that we provide, are we keeping track to see, is it successful long-term in keeping people housed? Do we have any of that information?
Yes, Commissioner,
Okay.
and thank you for all those comments before. You're absolutely correct. The answer to do we need this, do we need that, or do we need that is yes, all of it. With the in-house programs on home repair, we do have an affordability period and requirement for everybody that we help. And so depending on the size of the investment, there is a lien on the property, which is our way of saying, please stay here because we've repaired it and we don't want you to move out. And so we keep track of our clients that way, and we check in with them to ensure that they're still safely housed. We have to strike a balance. We don't want to make it too arduous. So if you help somebody with a $5,000 roof
Right.
repair, you don't want to put a lien on their house for 30 years.
Right.
But you want to make sure that they have, that we're still connected with them. And of course, we have all the information and the data about who they are when they eventually move. I will say that with preservation, we do want to keep those units affordable, but we also want opportunities for people to move on to other assets, right? And so we do have a couple tools to do that. For example, the community land trust is a good first home. You're sharing the equity with the land trust, but we expect that you will be able to move on to something else. The more progress and sort of economic opportunities households have, the better we all are, so that we can have this inventory available to others coming behind them.
Right. No, thank you for that. And that makes sense. And I agree. I totally don't want to make it overly burdensome, you know, for someone to accept that. And especially if we're thinking about homeowners themselves. I have just two other points and then I'll wrap up. One thing that I've had discussions about with people in our utilities in these settings, and I don't know if there's anything we can do. I know there's been discussions in the past. I talked to so many people who their rent is affordable, but their utilities are not, because the landlords have no incentive to get better refrigerators, get better, you know, things that can significantly cut down on the cost of their utilities. And I'm not sure if there was a comment. And so that's something that I've noticed, especially when I was working in Providence a couple of years ago. And I don't think it's about our utilities being too expensive. I think it's about the home not being in good enough shape to be affordable. So that was just a note that I had. And then the last thing that I want to say is that we are, as our individual governments, going into a new budget cycle. And I, you know, just as an expression, I want to see y'all have more support. I think, Abena, it sounds like you're doing way too much. Like, you just have so much on your plate and you're handling it with so much grace, and it's not at all. I just think I would love to see you have all the support that you need to do this. And the reason I even bring that up is with what my office has been dealing with in trying to help those folks at the Meadows. I mean, I feel like I've been a social worker, which I'm not a social worker. And it seems like there are some gaps in staffing that we could consider filling. And so that's something that I, again, want to show just my support of, because to meet these needs, you need the resources to do it. You need the people power to do it. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, that's something that I would expect to see the city provide support for. So I hope you're doing an outstanding job. I didn't mean that at all as a dig to you. I just want to make sure that you have the support. You came in and kind of fulfilled like 3 roles of your predecessors. And so that's something that I would be supportive of too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dozier, then Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all. This is, you think about where we were in 2016 and before that, this has been phenomenal progress in the last 6 years. And to all of our public and private partners and the citizens who have stepped up, to all of our staff, I mean, you all have done a really great job. This is one of the most robust collaborative efforts I think we've seen in a long time. And you're right, that talking about it, that lifting this up, what you all have done statewide throughout the community is really what's going to unlock this in addition to these good programs. So I've got a few questions, but just to follow up on the good discussion we've had so far, a couple of things. I agree with most everything that's been said. Commissioner Welch, you brought something to mind when you were asking about, I'm looking back here at your comments, the 4,500 units that are certified versus others that may not be certified but may hit that price point. Is this something we track? Does OEV track these things?
We haven't in the past. So this effort is really kind of opening our eyes to what the inventory looks like. We don't have a policy or requirement for properties to register, you know, what they're doing, and so it is hard to track. The property appraiser's office helps us identify vacant lots and those kinds of things, but we don't have a registry of existing units that ask those kinds of questions. So it's what comes to our attention.
Okay. I'm not surprised at all that you are identifying that as a potential source of data that we could look at that would be helpful, because we know the certified units aren't the only thing that supports this effort. And there's a lot of folks in the community that could be meeting these benchmarks, helping, but they're open to anyone, and they just work on their own. They don't need any of the other assistance, so.
That's
really
right.
would
And let me
support-
just add for clarity there, every 5 years, we do a market analysis of our housing. That is on that dashboard, and so that gives you a broad view of the median rents in our community. We have that broken down by certain areas and zip codes, et cetera. So we can see on average just sort of where the rental market is, or the home ownership sales and home values. But it won't tell us precisely where units, like the map that I showed that says this development is certified affordable housing and it has this many units, et cetera.
Benna, can I add something on that?
Sure.
Yeah. The problem with the non-certified units is they're affordable until they're not. And that is the minute that there's a higher and better use that where I can make more money on it, ask the people that lived in the mobile home park that were affordable until they weren't. So the key to, to anything you're doing is not just that you do it, that you have long-term affordability with it. That having a unit affordable for one buyer, then they walk with a windfall, that doesn't do anything long-term. Or, that's why you have to have, covenants and restrictions that go beyond the initial person who lives in a unit. And that's the key to having a long-term inventory in the community. So, yeah, you want to count the ones that are just sort of naturally affordable. But again, that's right this minute they are, and just that minute they're not. But the ones that are certified with the covenants, will remain affordable for a long time, and that's the key to the good policy that your staff's trying to put together. Thanks.
I think that's a great. You good, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, no.
I think that is a great point, and I've heard reporting for years about the mobile home parks, and when a new owner comes in, how the costs are skyrocketing. And there's been a couple of examples where the owners organize and try to purchase the property, but they can't qualify for the same loans, the same structure as the larger firms, right? So just looking at that one example, but I think it is a really good point. I just think the data would be helpful in general, even if that helps us track the increase in the inflation in those costs. Sir, did you have something? Or?
No, I just wanted to add to what Mark was saying about in tracking the NOAAs, as what we call them, and also looking at investor activity in those communities where we know those existing properties might exist. And then putting resources behind, how can we get those properties in the hands of other mission-based organizations or those that want to keep them affordable. And as Mark said, make sure that they're long-term affordable, permanently affordable once they're acquired. And so, those are, I know, all things that Shington and Abena are looking at, in the broad scheme of all of their funding sources and all of the resources. But it is a good data point. I know that enterprise communities, for example, is starting a NOAA database. They're kind of working in certain communities. I know they've been doing that down in South Florida. That's something that, we could look at, partly as part of the inclusionary, looking at all of those things and how we can bring those tools to Tallahassee so that, you can track things like that and direct resources accordingly.
And if we move forward, and I do support the options on the table, that is something that we could contemplate in the next steps in development of the inclusionary housing, but any kind of new tracking or data or any resources that we might have, those are policies you could bring back to us as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's fantastic. James, I'm glad you mentioned the Home Expo, and support comes in so many ways. I think the Library of Things we've just started at the Leon County Public Libraries, you could get tools and whatnot to help improve your home as well if you can't afford those tools. So there's a lot of different pieces of this puzzle. Okay, so I wanted to follow up. That was the question you inspired for me, Commissioner Welch. And Commissioner Porter, you mentioned insurance costs and other things. I'll just add in, there are other programs that we've had at the county to help address, I think it's flood mapping and stormwater and other things. And once we do that, it helps people decrease their insurance costs.
Yep,
So
that's right.
those types of programs, I mean, they also work in this space. Okay, so moving on, and I'll try to go through this pretty quick, but this is a robust item, and yes, we couldn't cover all of the various things we've done in the last 6 years, but I encourage folks to look at the good work and the reports of the committees. What really stands out is how much collaboration we've had over the last 6 years and the increase, and the emphasis on that collaboration going forward, whether it's joint or agreements for the SHIP funds, looking at the common inclusionary housing policy. And Shanton, you and I talked about this in briefing. The county, and you referenced it in your remarks, the county does have policies running through the HFA in your office that set, maybe we'll say some benchmarks for when we donate property or other things, we track that. I would just say going forward, I think we should have common policies at our building departments, common policies when we donate property, so that whether someone comes to the city or the county, they're not relearning a different system. So I really hope the result of this effort over the next year, should we move forward, we can have some streamline information and policies and approach to this, and I think that will help everyone move forward. So that's just a general comment, but I think it builds on what you're already doing. The comp plan amendments, this is just one little nuance. I support moving forward with that, but when we were talking about this in briefing, and it's not something I think you mentioned in your comments, our comp plan cycle starts a little bit before the projected date when these policies will come back to us, and I want to make sure that our comp plan policy, that amendment for inclusionary housing, doesn't get too far ahead of the work that you all are doing. So we might have some flexibility in that schedule or something like that. I'm not sure that you had anything else to add, but I just want to make sure that we don't get ahead of what you all are working, because that's the real substance that's going to inform the comp plan.
Yeah, Commissioner, following our briefing, I did get opportunity to meet with the planning director, and we did talk about that. We would ensure that they are coming back concurrently, and we wouldn't be bringing it ahead of the ordinance, because like you're saying, we want to work with our development community, we want to work with the realtors, and we don't want the comp plan to signal like it's a done deal.
Thank you. And it is good to look over there and see the head of both of our building departments, already, planning department, all sitting together. I know you all collaborate, so that's really great. Yeah, just like you got your little clutch over there. That's good. Okay, I also agree. There's been a few comments, and it was something that stood out to me that more partners in this space, like Promised Land. The more, the better. There's a lot of different approaches. People have different assets. They're drawing on different resources. They're looking at different types of housing. So I would be interested to see how we either collaboratively, city and county, or independently, solicit and vet more organizations. I mean, I don't know if that's as formal as an RFP structure or something else. So I think Promised Land is something new, and that's my understanding. They're looking at funding and other things like that. There may be others who have been working in this space for a while but need a little bit of a boost. So I don't know if that can be added into, I don't even know if we have a motion on the table yet, Mr. Mayor, but I know Commissioner Maddox wanted to do that, so I will wait on that and allow you. All right, well, for the county side then, if you're willing to accept a motion, or do you want to get through comments first?
Let's finish comments. And
I'm
then
just fine.
And at a certain point, I'll turn it over to the chair, who will recognize the county for a motion, and we'll do the same at the city.
That's just fine. I only mention that because it could be added to those motions to bring us back some options on how we solicit more partners like Promised Land in the future. I would like to see what that process might be like, what that partnership might look like, and how we really encourage more community partners to join both city and county. So I will leave that, Mr. Mayor, on the table for now. Getting to the last few things that I wanted to mention, we've got a lot of discussion about clear title. Gainesville's got a new program, particularly in the minority community. We've talked about this for years. A family may have a house, but they may not have clear title to that house, and that really impacts others from inheriting that property. So I believe Legal Services in North Florida, Legal Aid Foundation, they support this effort, but that's something I'd love to learn more about. And I can pause here if anyone has comments on these, but I'm just running through quickly.
I would just add, at our home expo, we typically hold an air property session. It is standing room only.
Yes.
Because that is a critical issue in our community, and something that we work closely with Legal Services North Florida, but also our DSM to address, because that is something that a lot of awareness and education is needed, especially in these population that we assist in our respective departments. Yeah.
Anything more we can do on that, and I think is really critical. So thank you for mentioning that, Shannon. And I'm not surprised you have standing room only in those workshops.
Can I add on to the air title? I know
Yes.
something we're seeing statewide is local governments, particularly with SHIP programs, considering including estate planning as part of the homebuyer education process. And we're actually working on kind of like a draft notice that, SHIP administrators can include, with that to, with that funding, hey, go talk to legal services, maybe form those connections so they can have at least a consultation to talk about, what are your options before you go into that purchase. So, it's easy to prevent it ahead of time, than try to cure it after the fact. And that's something that's, a easy, low-cost investment that could yield, a lot of benefits in the future. So that's something that we're seeing statewide, and that's something that can be done here as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you for adding that. I'm really glad I paused there, because that's such an important piece of this, both for new homeowners and existing. So let's do that when you've got the new programs. I've also recently heard that in estate planning, this is extraordinary. We hear about donating money and other things, but people may donate property to be affordable or to Habitat or to others when they draft their will. And so that's something to encourage. That really stood out. All hands on deck, right? So the last two things, this is a really big one. And I wanted to come back to, it's one of the first things you said. And I want to make sure I captured it right in my notes. I wasn't sure if it was the 30% or the 50% that was an average $25 per hour wage. You mentioned that, it was just, sorry for making you go back there, but it was one of the first slides. Don't think I have my glasses on yet. So, was I right? Was it the 30% or 50%?
That was, so we have extremely low income is about 50% AMI. That's about a $26,000 annual salary. And that's what we're talking about, feeling the greatest pressure point of affordability.
You just mentioned the hourly wage at one point. We've got annual wages, or, what your annual income might be, but that, and you don't have to go back. I'll just say, you mentioned $25 an hour at some point.
Yes,
and
that's the area median income.
That's the area median income. Okay, so if we are looking, you reference Amazon as an example of bringing on new jobs, that would be $15 an hour. So that's what I wanted to understand, was where was the difference there? Could we see an Amazon job as helping to lift and close that income gap? Because we're not just talking about creating affordable housing, but helping people afford that housing, right?
So a $15 per hour job translates to about $31,000 annual salary. That puts you squarely in that 60% AMI. You're still considered a low-income household for the purposes of the programs that we design. So, again, the gradient will exist in any community, and I think that's okay. The challenge is finding units that are affordable to you at that particular range. And so a $15 living wage job, That's about 750 for housing, and that's really hard to find in any community across the entire U.S.
Okay. I don't think this will surprise anyone in this room, but we have a huge issue coming in 2 days. And for me, this is the critical point. We need infrastructure, we need housing, and we need a lot of good jobs that bump that wage up. And if we think about Danfoss, their average wage is 150% over annual. 70% of their jobs, you don't need a 4-year degree for. And that's just the new construction that they're looking at. So if we can create more jobs and a lot of diversity in those jobs and bump that wage up, we will help more people afford housing in all of these different categories and have a living wage going forward, increase their wealth. So I think that is a really critical part. We can create more housing, but we got to lift that wage up. You all have made that point really strongly today and in the item, and I really appreciate that. And there was a lot here, Mr. Painter. I'm glad for the feedback. The last thing is the innovation. We've got new technology coming on. We have a great new company in town focused on 3D printing. We talked about modular homes and new tech. If we focus on the innovation, make sure our permitting departments are ready to go with new technology like 3D printing, we may be able to cut down on the supply chain issues, the construction cost issues, and the labor issues, because a lot of these systems use less material, less labor. So I think we just need to keep that in the back of our mind, that we've got some really new opportunities coming in the future to build houses in a different way that might address some of these things. With that, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've got Commissioner Matlow, Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox, Commissioner Cummings, and then Commissioner Nick Maddox. Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, everybody.
Morning.
First off, just thank you for your hard work and getting us to this point. You know, we make progress every day, so it's good to see this come to fruition. I had a couple of questions on the inclusionary ordinances. I recall when we did Canopy, there was trouble. We tried to get people in at 80% of AMI, and we had to go back and expand it to 100% AMI due to, I don't know if it was financing issues or what, but as we know, interest rates are likely going up soon, and it's going to be more difficult for people to obtain mortgages than it has been in the past. So I just, what's being proposed moving forward, I was just wondering what income brackets this ordinance will target. Will it go down to 80%? And would that be achievable, or is it more towards the 100% end?
Commissioner, I think that we'll be probably open to the engagement that we receive to see what will work well. Part of the challenge of home ownership is down payment is one of the biggest barriers for people to be able to afford a home. So regardless of the price point, if they don't have savings, it makes the house even more unattainable. So we're going to, on the city side at least, we've actually, by your direction with ARP funding, have significantly increased our allocation to down payment assistance, and we hope that that will help kind of close that gap with affordability. That was one of the challenges at Canopy, just to open the door for more people who do have financial wherewithal to home ownership, but they still need assistance because they can't afford the market rate. So I think that if the boundary is expanded and you have more options coming through this, you will see more variety of units at different price points. You will see more options for people to consider versus just the few that ended up triggering our current policy.
Okay.
Yeah. The AICs were very deliberate in not picking a number. And that part of that was looking at working with Florida Housing Coalition to see what is best. And then also looking at our own programs, because our programs may need to be tailored in a way to address inclusionary housing in our community so we can get to what that number may be. It may be 80%, it may be 100%, whatever it may be. It's not going to be an exclusive policy we bring with you without thinking through what programs that we currently have in place to address homeownership.
Okay. Well, do you think it would be likely to create affordability for anybody under 80%, or do you think it's really the 80% to 100% bracket that this would impact?
I think you will capture those below 80% AMI, particularly when you add multifamily rentals in it. And I think when you add home ownership opportunities across the whole city, you start to change the cost of development. a little bit, right? So a development on, green parcels are going to be more costly than some of the redevelopment in the urban service area. So we're hoping that some of those savings can start to support a more affordable house option. And also the subsidies from our other programs like down payment will help people that are at the lower income to also achieve home ownership or rental. So I think we have to sort of attack it from multiple angles, and the range of AMIs just give us the flexibility to serve people where they are.
And I'll just add, just generally as a policy, when you start looking at things like density bonuses and other things, other incentives that you can add to, that will allow you to reach, those lower incomes. Some places have, very generous density bonuses. We mentioned Palm Beach, for example. They have up to 100% density bonus. If you can apply that, there are certain rules around that, but those are the things that allow you to start to reach those lower incomes if they can do more market units and make that additional revenue. So it all balances out.
Okay, and I guess one more question on that. When we look at the very low income, the 30% of 15 or even 10, with the current minimum wage, that's $400, $500, $600 a month, maybe. What's that outlook look like? I mean, are we able to create? I don't know many people who are creating rentals that are $400 or $500 a month. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it is a national challenge. And that's why we speak about the spectrum, because we know there are elderly families or households that are on fixed income, right? They're individuals exiting homelessness. They've just started out with a career. So folks are at different places, and there are different kinds of layering of support, like Social Security benefits, that are sometimes coupled with permanent supportive housing where there is a subsidy to the rental unit, and then they contribute a portion. Of course, public housing is along that spectrum as well, and they receive an allocation at the federal level. And so we're kind of at the mercy of whatever HUD will allocate to us, and they usually only give us about 2,600 vouchers to support families. So that is exactly why we need something at every stage, because what happens when you have a unit that comes online, for example, at $600, it's affordable for that particular group, but those that make a little bit more also really like that they have to spend less on their housing, so they occupy those units. So I think the more we can release the pressure along the whole spectrum, hopefully we can have people kind of move along into different types of housing and free up units for others that really can't afford it.
Okay. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Where I'm going with that, I think, is this is great progress. Let's get this done and push. And then I think maybe next time we come together, let's come up with a plan for the lowest income. Maybe that's more public investment locally. Maybe that's different types of subsidies and things we can do, because we're talking a lot about how we can get people into home ownership. That's great, but there's still the 15,000 people that we saw, renting that we need to try to directly address. And the last thing I would say, I agree with Commissioner Welch and Commissioner Dozier. If we got land, let's get as many people involved to start building on it as we can and as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We have Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox, Cummings, Jackson, Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to just, first of all, say kudos. You guys have done a tremendous job bringing this information to us. Once upon a time, I served, I think, when you came on board, I was there representing the Planning Commission, and we've grown by leaps and bounds. So kudos to the work that you've done, and I do plan to support all 5 of the recommendations, because I believe that when we ask you to do something and you do it and you bring it back to us, we should, for every good reason, follow your recommendation, especially since we've had an opportunity in all of our briefings to get clarifications and questions answered. So I have no problem supporting that. I do want to address a couple of comments that I've heard today. One, no matter how much money you make, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be able to borrow money to buy a home, because if your credit is not good, and many times you're dealing with some other barriers that we all are aware of. Let's just face it. Sometimes when you just show up at the bank, you're not able to get what you need. So we need to take that into consideration. It's not all roses when it comes to home ownership for many of us. And so we do still have that barrier that we have to overcome. There are some, perhaps some laws that try to protect us and try to make that possible, but we still need to realize that that is still an elephant in the room. So home ownership continues to be a dream for many. And so we have to find alternative ways to get folks into housing and get them the assistance that they need. In regards to growth, I heard my colleague say something about, nobody wants to grow. Well, if we don't grow, we die. And unfortunately, growth sometimes means we have to cut trees. And that means that sometimes we have to do some things that we don't always want to do, but as we grow, we're having to do what we have to do to provide for human beings to live here. And we do want people to move to Florida. It's not a problem for me. We want them to move to Tallahassee. And so we want to make Tallahassee attractive and affordable for people to move here. So I'm with smart growth. We do it smartly, and I think that that's what we've been doing, and looking at how we can do more as we need to. There was some question about the 30%. That's not our definition. That's the federal definition of what affordable housing is, 30% of your income. And I know that that may be a lot for some folks, but there's a difference between affordable and low income. And today we were talking about affordable and the things that we can do. So I wanted to clear that out. The other thing too is that there was some mention about vacant lots in mobile home parks. Having lived in a mobile home park many years ago, I'll just share that you can't build a house right next to a mobile home just because the lot is vacant. There's some other restrictions and other things that you have to take in consideration. And you wouldn't want to build your home next to a mobile home because it devalues it because of the location. So there may be some opportunities to see where if, perhaps a mobile home park or what have you is completely vacant that can be purchased and then do that. But building houses next to mobile homes that is not private property or family owned, it kind of poses some type of conflict or problem. Also, and many times, mobile homes are connected to septic tanks. I hope that we're not going to be building homes connected to septic, because those homes that are on septic, we need to be looking at how to get them off of septic for environmental reasons. So I hope that in all that we're going to be planning to do, we're going to be not attaching homes to septic tanks where absolutely possible to have other connections. The other thing in regards to the other CDCs or other organizations, I agree that the more the merrier, but don't punish folks who go through the process and come through and a recommendation is being made for them to join this need that we have. We say we have a crisis, so whatever the process is, follow that process. Get yourself approved, get on the agenda so that it can happen. I don't think that anyone's restricting or stopping any entity from being a part of this. And if so, please let me know. But briefly, can you just describe what the process is to become a partner in what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I can speak on the city's version, and Shinkton, feel free to chime in. We have a mix of ways that we partner with folks. There are pretty well-established entities like Habitat. It's an international organization. We know their model. And so you are called that every year we bring some item to you to continue your support of that particular approach. But that's just one tool. The city also partners with community development organizations, or there's so many acronyms. I know my colleagues in the back, CBDOs, CHODOs. Basically, these are tools we have to build capacity for local community-based organizations to do infill redevelopment primarily. That's really the the lane that they operate in just because of their size. And so we do annually, we do training. We request anybody who's interested in becoming a CHODO to send us their information. And if they need help to get the capacity to become a CHODO, we have courses and we kind of walk them along that process. So that's part of the conversation we've had with Promised Land CDC as they are a new entrant into this, giving them material, inviting them to the courses and the training, giving them access to the information that some of our existing partners have so they can start to ramp up their operations as well. So that's part of what we already do within the city.
And the Promised Land CDC did all of those things, and now they're ready to move forward?
They're in the process of doing all of those things. They have been, and I know we have Mr. Gerald Clay in the audience, gentleman that's been really working hard to meet as many different partners as possible. So yes, it takes some time to get all the ducks in a row, but we are committed to partnering with anybody that wants to work with us. Absolutely.
All right, I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that no one's handpicking, but that it's open. It's an open process, and we just need to follow that process. And having said that, Mr. Mayor, that clears all of my points. But I know that as a member of the AHAC on behalf of the city, I'll be looking to you to make the motion, and I would like to second it if and when you decide to make that motion.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Commissioner. We're going to listen to the last three county commissioners speak, and then I will come back to you. Okay? Let's go Commissioner Cummings, Jackson, and Commissioner Maddox. We will finish with you as the member of the county AHAC.
Thanks, sir.
If that's all right. Commissioner Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to my fellow commissioners, city and county, and Abina, Shinkton, and all of your staff. I just echo the sentiments again of my colleagues on a very well produced written report. I am excited about the results of the report. It certainly, I support all the recommended actions in the report. And like Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox, I also commend you all in pursuing partnerships with other CDCs that are specifically interested in providing affordable housing to our citizens. And I appreciate the fact that you all invite other entities as well. I know Mr. Barber indicated that he has one, and I'm sure that you all will embrace his entity and others as well, because we want to clearly close that gap and provide affordable housing for home ownership. I commend you all as well for also recognizing that the inclusionary housing policy that I understand that has been in place in the past on the county level and on the city level really wasn't that productive. So you guys reached out, you did your research, you reached out to other counties, Palm Beach, I believe you indicated Jupiter and some other municipalities, and you looked at their inclusionary housing policies and you looked at what works, and you brought us back a proposal, and I do believe that that proposal is a step forward in making sure that our housing developments will set aside a certain amount of units that qualify for affordable housing units. So I appreciate you doing that. I just want to, however, I guess, follow up on some comments that was made by Commissioner Matlow, focusing on closing the gap between renters and home ownership. And your report indicated that the largest group in the area of need is those looking for affordable rental housing. And once that affordable housing is in place, in many instances, as we know, some of the monthly payments equate to mortgage payments. And my question is, well, I know that we have the down payment assistance program where we assist individuals with paying the down payment for the purchase of a home. And I know Abina indicated that is one of the barriers, because many people live from paycheck to paycheck, especially when there's a family of 4, family of 6, you don't have any money to set aside for your down payment. So we certainly laud the down payment assistance program. But my question is there any particular initiative to identify those individuals that are renting whose rental payments equate to, in many instances, a mortgage payment? Or is that in your purview to identify those individuals and embrace them and see what we can do to move them from the rental status to the home ownership status? I think we all recognize that in this country, home ownership is perceived as the first step toward experiencing the American dream, realizing the American dream. And of course, it is a first step. It takes many of us a long way throughout our lifetimes where we can provide for our children's education, and provide for our families on a daily basis. So is that within your purview, or is there any particular initiative to identify those people, help qualify those people and move them? Now, I know in many instances, individuals come to the city for down payment assistance, but do we go out to seek them so that we can sort of move that needle closer to home ownership?
Commissioner, the answer is yes, through our partners. That's what Tallahassee Lenders Consortium does. That's what Habitat does. That's what Mount Olive does. That's what Promised Land is talking about doing, as coming in as part of another partner. We work with these community partners specifically to do that. They engage them, they market them, they advertise the importance of what you need to do to become a homeowner, so you don't have to rent anymore. So you can get that backyard where kids can play and your pet can play and all that good stuff. Yeah, those are the partners we work with on a daily basis to assist in doing that. And actions that you've taken is helping with that too, right? Because you're looking at how do we do more infill redevelopment, as I mentioned earlier? How do we address the missing middle? When you do those things, you provide access, greater access to home ownership for those, you're right, who are paying like mortgages right now in rental units.
Yeah, I will just add our Neighborhood First initiative is a key way that we are getting closer to neighbors and to residents. And the neighborhoods, through their plan, have told us what they want in terms of the mix of home ownership and rental. And they know their neighbors, and they're wanting to create programs that specifically go door to door and say, hey, have you thought about owning this home you're renting? Or talking with the property owners in their neighborhood and saying, hey, have you thought about a lease to own option here? So we're starting to see that at the grassroots level, and then by policy and program investment, we're meeting them at the point of their strategies.
And I think that's great. I think we recognize that government can't solve all the problems. We have got to partner with other entities to make this happen so that we can elevate our people. And like Commissioner Dozier said, of course, we've got to look at the income level. We are all excited about Amazon, but the bottom line is our citizens have to be able to earn a livable wage so that they can take care of their families and take care of their children. So I applaud you for reaching out for the partnerships. Do we know specifically, though, with our partners, are they specifically zeroing in on certain housing areas, looking at what the renters are paying monthly? Do we know if they're going that deep into identifying potential homeowners?
I can't say for sure. I know they do probably more of a general promotion of their programs. I think that's important in the community, but word of mouth always gets out to what TLC's gotten on, what Habitat has got going on, and some of our other partners. But that's something we can delve deeper with them in targeted communications.
Yeah, I know that there are flyers in the various complexes, and we know how Habitat reaches out, but I would think if we could do some specific recruitment in the various, housing developments, the housing areas, and we could reach some individuals that might work day and night, so to speak, and don't get a chance to see the flyers or hear the commercials because they're working, trying to make ends meet. In many instances, those individuals work two jobs. So if we could be more deliberate in reaching out, I think that we could move that needle further from renter to home ownership.
Commissioner, I think we're seeing some progress in that area, particularly with the increased rental assistance that we've provided in our community. Some of the partners that helped us to get the rental assistance out to individuals, we're also coupling that with some housing counseling and helping them think about their own financial stability after the CARES Act funding runs out. And some of that conversation, we know just from feedback from them, has led to thinking about the next year and the next 2 years. So you get your assistance for 3 months, but have you thought about a plan that will get you towards some financial sustainability there? So I think those conversations are happening a lot now. And when you get somebody through the door with an immediate need met, then you can start to have those conversations about what happens next.
Thank you. And I think that type engagement is certainly a positive step in the right direction. So thank you guys for a great report. Thank you for all the job that you all have done year after year. And we're looking forward. We're looking forward to positive results, and I know that we will maintain our scoreboard of the results going forward, so we look forward to a positive report next year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I promise to be brief. Most of mine is kudos surrounding the effort made for the large goals, or I guess bold goals is what you might call them, of 4,000 housing units or housing special, non-homeless special needs. And we exceeded that number by well over 500 additional. The goal was 4,000. We were able to house 4,500 plus. So I don't know what you're doing so unique, but as a champion of the disabled community and as a permanent guardian of an end user on that end of the equation, I'm extremely proud of what we've done for kind of the least among us. I looked at the qualifications, included substance abuse, mental and physical disabilities, but then even victims of domestic violence, that we have provided opportunities well in excess of what our bold goal was from 15 to 20, which was 4,000, I believe, and we exceeded it by 4,538. I'm sure that the menu for that is long-winded, but I would love to know the secret on how we reach those 4,500, and I'll be getting with Shinkton and finding out how we can get more. I appreciate the incredible work that you have done to put this together, but especially the collaboration of taking care of folks in Tallahassee and Leon County.
Thank you. Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think everything that needs to be said has been said. So, Mr. Mayor, if you're going to take a motion from the county side, I'll go ahead and make the motion for staff recommendation and thank staff for a job well done. One thing I wanted to point out is what Commissioner Williams Cox and Commissioner Cummings, I'm sorry. It's one of those mornings. I was in.
We go to the same church, I think.
Exactly. That would be my church, sir. Is that when you talk about the last recommendation, number 5, and I think Mr. Barber spoke on it a second ago, is that we open those opportunities up to everyone. And I know it's within the motion because it's been a process, but I think we get that process out to everyone and let them know what that process is to go through, and that we open that process up because we want everyone who wants to get involved in this game to get involved in this game. We thank the Promised Land for coming to the table and doing the research and doing what they need to do and going through that process. But now, let the word be out wide to everyone that if there's a process to go through to partner with us to get affordable housing done, and we're trying to get as much done as we can. So with that being understood as a part of number 5 that we expand there. I'll go ahead and make the motion for options 1 through 5. I think I got a second for Commissioner Dozier. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Commissioners, we've had a motion from the vice chair. It's already been seconded, I believe, by Commissioner Dozier. You weighed in previously. The chair desires to make a couple comments prior to us pulling the trigger. First of all, I want to thank staff, echo all of those accommodations that have been offered. I was pondering Ms. Miller's role from Tallahassee's lenders and didn't hear anything specific too much. But I know that to Commissioner Cummings asked about the reaching out and the prepping citizens for home ownership. Home ownership is a mental state. It's a mindset, and it's something which aggressively a citizen has to want. It's an aspiration. It comes from the guts. It's visceral. And how you have taken people, many descendants of 246 years of plantation living, and to walk them down through the ages of sharecropping. And many people just simply do not believe, have not acquired this mindset, this mentality of ownership, and we get that. I think Commissioner, the other Williams Cox commissioner said there was an elephant in the room. The elephant signifies a big issue, big point. I get that metaphor. But I will go stronger. There is a lion and a tiger in the room. And racism has what we've looked at HMDA data in this community, that African-American applicants are turned down 3 times greater when all of the data, all of the background, all of the variables are the same. They're turned down 3 times. That's the low number, but it goes up amplified 4 to 5 times. And we're tipping around some points that makes it very difficult for some to access home ownership. And when you know you've got to, because an elephant really don't hurt nobody, but it's them tigers and lions in the room that will slay you. And you've got to get up off the ground and come back again and again and again. And folk who are already withered from the heat of a searing type of rejection all across their lives and society is a hell to summons that courage. We did not have the banking community here, and I'm not sure if us collectively can scope or imagine ourselves as summoning our banking community to give accountability for the HMDA data. The home mortgage disclosure data that shows specifically the performance level of banks and financial institutions in this community. I don't like the numbers, but I'm just one commissioner. I have invited and had hoped our county's commission would get up, stand up, and bring to a table like this, what in the world is our banking community going to do? We have not maintained that sense of challenge. I'm prepared when you are, but thus far we're dragging our feet. Staff has done all that they can. The rest, there's a level of velocity that we have to bring from within ourselves to the private sector. The people who are holding our monies, we're putting in these little savings accounts, we're doing these little checking accounts, but our people, all of those who are falling in the margins, cannot. Commissioners, I believe we have a greater responsibility. Our staff has told us what the infrastructure, what they can do with people who are trying to afford. The next level is for us to ante up, to man up, to woman up, to stand up, to get up, and bring the institutions that we can learn what it is that holds them back from doing what they need to do in the area of affordable housing. Commissioner Minor, your question was a great one. Your question said, with the rising cost of materials, how will it impact affordability? I didn't hear an answer. I heard a response, but I didn't get an answer. I made my own conclusion. It ain't going to be good. It is not going to be very good. And then, commissioners, I would say that in years past, I had asked and had sought for the county and the city to bank collectively. I have asked and have sought that the school board would be a part of this trilogy. And when you consider the city's budget, the county's budget, when you consider the budget of the school board, there is close to $2 billion that possibly could be leveraged, for policies that favor local selection of those persons who are coming for. Now, this risk factor that everyone says is too much cherry picking. Anybody can walk in a 750. Everybody wants the 750s and up. But who's pulling for? And where we could collectively put our monies into leverage is for those who ain't 750s and the folk who fall below. There is an institutional role that when we leverage our dollars, if possible, can we explore it? Maybe it's outside of our imaginations. The University of Pennsylvania, some years ago, we learned, I believe, when we went to Philadelphia, I believe it was for the All-American City competition, and I was privileged to join a group that city manager Favors had pulled together. And I saw a very impressive thing that University of Pennsylvania was doing. It financed, it was purchasing properties in areas of distress, and it was financing for its employees. They're moving into the areas to give stability to communities that were adjacent to its university. And they wanted for their PhDs and their leaders and their to come into these communities to give that diversity, that stabilization, that mixture that you talked of. But they didn't just talk it, but they were willing to finance and create and collect from their employees checks. And I think Anita Favors was interested in something like that, urban infield, city financing for its employees if they moved into certain neighborhoods. The county could do the same thing, but maybe that's outside the scope of our thoughts today. Commissioners, we have a motion from the vice chairman that's on the floor. We have gnawed on this bone. I give you one last round if you desire a closing comment. If not, hearing, seeing no hands, all in favor of Commissioner Mattis's motion of options 1 through 5, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose the same sign. It passes unanimously. Mr. Mayor.
Excellent, thank you. In closing, I want to thank the members of the AHAC, some who are with us today, both city and county, for the hard work that y'all do in a volunteer capacity. Again, Nick, I love working with you on the joint AHAC, and you're doing a great job at the county. I want to thank our teams, both at the county and the city, and our partners that have joined us today for amazing work as well. I'm real proud of the work that we've done at the city in conjunction with the work that we've done with the county. If you think about it, 3 years ago, we created the first strategic plan at the City of Tallahassee, and part of that was making affordable housing a top priority. When we talk about data-driven decisions, I think the data speaks for itself. When we see that sharp increase, it's not just the financial investment, which we have done, $3.2 million for Orange Avenue, $500,000 for Magnolia Oaks, $6.3 million in our dedication for ARPA funding. Those 3 line items total $10 million alone. But it's also the creative policy. And Ben, I give you a lot of credit and the city manager for bringing this to our attention at the city side. When we talk about the density bonuses that we have put in place, the inclusionary housing ordinance that we have amended to update it within the city limits, the creation of the community land trust, the construction loan program, the landlord risk mitigation fund, the vacant lot infill program, and let us not forget one of the most creative that we did was the land use conversion policy, allowing us to take the older product of the motels and hotels and state office complexes that could be converted into affordable housing. By no stretch of the imagination are we done. Again, it was highlighted today at this conversation, the amount of work that we still have left to do. But I do give you credit and my colleagues credit for moving the ball forward and for truly putting in place some creative policy and financial investment, because affordable housing is a top priority at the City of Tallahassee. As a member of the AHAC, I'd like to make the motion for staff recommendation 1 through 5. Commissioner Williams-Cox has seconded it. Any further comment on the motion on the table? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Passes unanimously 5-0. Seeing nothing else to come before us at
Mr.
this
Mayor,
workshop. Oh,
if I can just say quickly, let me point of personal privilege, please.
Sure.
Mark Hendrickson, you may not recognize him behind that mask, but he is one of the coaches at Capitol Park and has been there for more than 20 years. He was on the board with me, and he's still there. And I just want to thank him personally. He's been responsible, him and the team, for getting many kids who otherwise might have gone a different direction into positive situations, playing baseball at the high school as well as the college level, and some in the National Baseball League. So I just wanted to point that out. Glad to have you in chambers, Mark.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I also wanted to recognize Gerald Clay, who is here, the new executive director with the Bethel CDC. Gerald, welcome to Tallahassee, and we certainly look forward to working with you.
Seeing no further business coming forth to the workshop, we stand adjourned.